Yo, what is up guys? Blake here bringing you a special video today. I'm going to be talking about the new changes with resist and damage, how they actually work, and how I feel about them. Because I feel like a lot of people don't understand because it's not obvious in the patch notes. It doesn't say exactly how it is effective. But let me just give you guys a quick rundown of how that works. So there is a limit and an intersection now for how damage and resist work. Pierce has been unchanged at this time, but obviously it still factors into resist. So basically what the intersection and the limit means is the limit is sort of like, you can consider it the hard cap. I know that Ratbeard doesn't like it being called a cap, but that's sort of how you can view it. It's sort of where you cannot pass that point. So in PvP, the resist limit is 70, which means that realistically, after Pierce is factored, you cannot have more than 70 resist. And the damage limit for PvP is 200, which is the same as PvE. Obviously, it's going to be incredibly hard for you to reach that limit because there is diminishing returns after the intersection. And what the intersection means is basically how much of the stat you can get without suffering any penalty. So if you have 100 damage in PvP, which is the intersection, you will get 100% damage. You will get the full value of it. But let's say now that you have 110% damage. That 110% won't actually be that much. It might be like 108%. The further and further you go away from the intersection and the closer you go to the limit, the more diminishing returns you will experience. So let's say you have about 150 damage, right? You're not going to get 150. You might get 125, for example. So you'd give up 25% of the damage as opposed to 2% in the previous example. So I hope that makes sense for how the limit and the intersection work. But the big part that I feel like people aren't really talking about is that the limit is applied and the intersection are applied after Pierce is factored. So let me explain to you exactly what that means in game. So let's say you have 76 resist, right? Classic behemoth. You got all the normal gear and everything. You might be thinking, oh Blake, so since it's 76, it's over the 50 limit, so this is actually going to be like 60 resist, right? Not exactly, because the Pierce is factored in first. So let's say you're in ice with 76 resist and you're going against a fire with 40 Pierce. And you don't have a brace up, okay? Let's say you don't have a brace. So you have 76 resist, no shield, nothing. They take an open Pierce on you. An open S'mores with 40 Pierce. This is how the math actually works. So you would have your 76 resist minus their Pierce, which is 40, right? Which brings you to 36. And then you would then get the full 36% resist. So it would be exactly the same as how it works now. Because a lot of people think that, oh, you have 76 resist, which with the new limit and intersection would be like 65. So you would do 65 minus 40 equals 25. But you see how big of a difference that is. And this is just one example of what I'm doing. Let me give you guys an even crazier example. Let's say, for example, you're a warded behemoth, okay? So let's say you have 90 resist. Just for the sake of this argument, let's just say you have 90 resist to fire. You have no brace, you have no shield. The fire has 40 base Pierce, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna take an open S'mores. It's a good move. I've got 2 buffs, right? It would be the 90 resist minus 40 Pierce equals 50. And you would get that full 50% resist because it is before the intersection. So people think that having more than 70 resist on your stat page is a bad idea, when reality it's not a bad idea at all, and resist is still going to be king in PvP. Same with Pierce as well. So I think that's something that people don't really understand. They think that it gets factored in before with the new changes, but it gets factored at the very end. So this is also why Brace is going to be incredibly powerful. Because let's say, for example, you're like a Balance, right? With, Balances usually have like maybe 62 resist. You've got a Fortify on that brings you about 77. Let's say you're going against an Ice who hits you with 32 base Pierce. It would be 77 minus 32, which would equal 45, right? Sorry, I dubbed that everyone. You would get 45 resist. It would not factor in before. So resist, like I said, is going to be incredibly powerful. I think that ward is still going to be super meta. A lot of people are acting like ward isn't a good talent anymore, that having high resist is a bad idea, but it's just not the case with the new changes. So now I want to talk a little bit about what good stats are going to be, what you should be going for different schools. In terms of resist, having a lot of resist is still good, especially for defensive schools like Ice, nice balance in life. Resist is still going to be extremely powerful, especially with brace. It's going to be just as good as it was now, and you won't really see the difference as well. And it also goes to play into strike, right? Let's say you're in ice with 76 resist and you have a brace, which brings you up to 96, and then you put up a 55 tower shield, right? So you're going to have approximately like 139 resist, 140, whatever. If somebody is hitting you with strike and a pierce blade and 40 base pierce, it's going to take that 140 resist minus the 100 pierce, and you're going to have 40 resist, which you will get the full value of because it's below the 50 intersection. So the limit really only comes into factor when the resist after pierce applied comes into play. So an example of that is, let's say you have 76 resist as an ice and you put up a 55 tower shield, and let's say the fire is going to go for an overtime on you because they see you have a shield. That first hit that goes into the tower shield, let's say they don't pierce all of it. Let's say they have 40 pierce, you have a 55 tower, it would go through the 15% tower shield, and then your resist would factor in. So your 76 resist wouldn't actually be 76, it would probably be somewhere in the 60 range. I don't know the exact numbers. I think there's a graph somewhere out there, but I couldn't find it, and I hope that they release more information like that so it'll be easier to kind of tell. But that is a situation where you wouldn't get the full value. Let's say you're a behemoth with ward, so 90 resist, and you have brace because your pet casted it, bringing you up to 110, and then you put a set shield, which brings you up to 180, right? If you're going against, let's say, a fire who strikes with a pierce blade and has 40 base pierce, that is 100 pierce, right? It would do the 180 resist minus your 100 pierce, and you would have 80 effective resist. That 80 resist would then be passed through the limit function and would probably be something like 65% or something like that. So there is some good sides to this, right? I think it does penalize, being super defensive, so jading, being like a behemoth with ward, resist, brace, all that stuff, which is good, right? But it's not going to change the majority of normal gameplay if you're not using ward or have excessive resist. This is really good, though, against jades and people that snipe and go immune. Let's say you're immune, right? So let's say you have like 150 resist on your base gear. You have a brace, you have a minus 90 shield, okay? So you're impenetrable, right? The guy could have infoul, 60 base pierce, strike, pierce blade. It's not going to pierce through everything, right? It won't even pierce through the shields and the brace, most likely. So let's say your resist, after everything is calculated, you've got about 130 resist left over. That 130 would then be passed through the limit function, and you would have a maximum of 70 effective resist. So the good thing to know is that no matter what you're hitting into, your opponent will never, ever have more than 70 resist in PvP. And that is a good thing against jades. That's probably the best part about this resist change for the most part, is that even if you're going against a jade or somebody immune, you will always get 30% at the bare minimum of your damage value against them. And I think that's huge and a very, very good thing. But does that mean that ward is obsolete now? Does that mean that it's not worth rock and resist? Absolutely not. Resist is still going to be incredibly powerful. Brace kind of got buffed because of all these changes and stuff. I hope that makes sense. If you guys have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer them. And yeah, so last thing I want to talk about is the damage changes. So this one is a little bit trickier to sort of know exactly how much it's doing. I hope that they add a feature where they tell you with your stats exactly what your effective damage and effective resist are. That would be really, really nice, because like, let's say you have 108 damage like I do in this situation. It passes the PvP limit, which is 100. Or sorry, the PvP intersection for damage, which is 100, right? So your extra 8% that you get past the intersection of 100 isn't actually 8%, but we don't know exactly how much that is, right? This extra 8% could actually be 7%. It could be 5%, it could be 7.9%. We don't know the exact numbers or how it works. So I think that having base damage is still going to be quite good, but this gets factored in before, right? Where resist goes hand in hand with pierce, and you could still get the full value of your resist even if your base set is over the limit for PvP. Damage is not quite so the same. If you have any damage point over 100, it will get passed into the limit and intersection function, and you will get a diminishing return past 100 damage, right? So does that mean that you should sacrifice all your damage, that you should go for, just 100 damage, so that way you don't have any diminishing returns? No. Base damage is still going to be good, but you don't want to just go for 160 damage like fire does and stuff like that. You probably want to give up a good chunk of your damage damage. I think a good sweet spot from kind of what I played with is anywhere under about 130. I feel like past that point, the diminishing returns become too high. You're better off going for pierce, you're better off going for resist, shadow rating, crit block, stuff like that. So that's kind of how it goes. How I feel about this update, I think that it's definitely a step in the right direction. I think that they might need to tweak the numbers a little bit for the intersection and the limits for PvP. Again, this is all PvP related. There were some changes for PvE with the resist and damage as well, but the numbers are different, and I'm not going to cover this in this video. So yeah, just a quick recap of everything. Resist is still going to be really, really powerful, and I think that ward pets as well are still going to be meta for the time being, which I'm not sure is a great thing. I hope that eventually the meta will become more slowed down, but still balanced for everybody without having to rock, you know, maximum set shields, braces, 90 resist, etc. And I think a big thing that we gotta wait for too is that they haven't touched how Pierce works. Obviously, it has changed slightly in the way that it reacts with resist, with the limit and intersection functions, but the way that Pierce actually works is still identical, which is why you'll see a lot of people, I think, are gonna run high Pierce builds. So instead of going for a ton of damage, like 160, you'll see people rocking like Duelist Robe, Turquoise Robe, stuff like that, maximizing their Pierce, running Armor Breaker on their pet, maybe Mighty, maybe even Armor Piercer, and getting around, you know, 45 to maybe even 55 Pierce so that they can counter the resist. So it should be interesting. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to mess around with some more and just play around with. So yeah, I'll have more videos for you guys. Let me know if this was helpful and if you guys enjoyed this guide and explanation of how the new Pierce and resist and damage changes work in PvP. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. As always, peace out, guys.